Hi, good evening. Whoops. My name is Denise Martin. I work for New York Magazine's Vulture, and I'm very excited to be here tonight. And I will now bring out Mindy Kaling.
Hi, guys. Hi, Denise.
Hello.
What's up? Whoa, this is a nice screening room.
Nice. It's intimate. It's very intimate, which is appropriate.
Yeah.
And you all just watched Frat Party, which is one of my favorite episodes because it has one of my favorite scenes ever, which is the stripper pole scene. Can you talk a little bit about where the idea for that came from?
Yeah, especially we knew that Bill Hader was available that week. And so we were like, okay, let's put him into the show. And we thought it'd be really funny. Those two guys, I love Bill and I love Anders. And we thought it'd be really funny for them to have an incredibly lame fight. But inherent in that was that they would sort of have to kind of be fighting over me, which as a comedian, you get nervous because you don't want people watching and being like, oh, is everyone just throwing themselves at this girl for no reason? So in order to kind of justify that, we were like, how can Mindy eat it in a really humiliating way? And the stripper pole sort of came from that.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty gnarly on the day. Like I felt horrified for those kids, the actors who were there, but they were good sports about it.
Did you know was it your idea? Did you know how you wanted to sort of move with the pole? Eventually you're going to dismantle it, which is great, but.
Yes. Well, we had actually a stunt double, or not a stunt double, because both of us at one point used the stripper pole, both me and my protege. So we had a stripper on set who was going to teach us moves. And Francia, who is the actress who played my protege, who's also a very kind of accomplished dancer herself, I think worked with her a little bit. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to learn how to do it well, because I feel that would, because then I'll start getting in my head, I should look competent at this. And the point was that it's lame. Ultimately, if I could go back in time and not look as gruesome, I would have learned a couple sachets or whatever. But you know what's very gross about a stripper pole, which I don't know if any of you guys have any experience about this. It gets very warm. And it's like when you're on the subway in New York City, and when you get in the subway, you pray for it to be cold.
Yeah.
And when it's warm, you're like, oh God, kill me.
Sticky.
But it was my own warm feeling. I was disgusted by my own warm stripper pole-ness or whatever. Anyway.
You got through it.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the lame fight between the two guys. It reminded me a lot of Bridget Jones's Diary and the lame fight.
Yes. One of my
there.
favorite romantic comedies.
So good. But you brought back Bill Hader for it. Tell me about, he was the first guy we see your character with in the pilot. What made him right to do that, to play that role?
Well, I think that with at least my friends and the women that I know, when they talk about why they like a guy as a love interest, very rarely is crazily hot the number one thing. In general, yes, we appreciate the Hemsworths and all the other people, but funny and appealing, and that if you can accomplish that, it's so much more of a feat, as a show or whatever. And Bill is just someone who largely, Will Forte on SNL, largely just plays giant weirdos on SNL. But he is objectively a pretty nice looking guy, and he's funny, and I just thought that would be fun to have him play someone that you could score music to when he walks by. He's special to me because he's so funny, and I thought people would buy that, and it worked. And so, with him and Seth Rogen and stuff, we just find out when they're available from movies and doing SNL, and we're just okay, let's just write him in because he's free this week.
Well, it was a tremendous episode. Can you tell me a little bit about, you started as a writer. Had you also wanted to act?
Yes, and actually most writer rooms for TV shows are made up of people who were, you ask them at one point, really wanted to act, but has their parents or whoever else told them it wasn't a good career path to go down. And I'd always acted, and I read about this a little bit in my book, I was never given any reinforcement. I never got any parts in any plays that I ever did, because there's never really roles for someone who looked like me. But I was very ambitious, and I didn't want to take no for an answer, so I just I thought I'd have to just write the parts myself, which has been largely true, which is advice I would give all of you guys, is that I have never walked into something, auditioned for it, and gotten it. So that hell, if you guys, just so you know, and I have my own TV show. So please let that inspire you. And all the people I know who are, doing what they, like Tina Fey, these are people who like did it that way. Sorry, I just took a tangential turn and then started giving, I was like a reverend for a second. I'm sorry. Like, what was even the question? It was like, what was like to kiss Bill Hader? I don't even remember. Sorry.
No, we had moved on to acting. So
okay,
it's
sorry.
For The Office, did you know you were going to be on screen as well? How did?
No, I mean, and I had no expectation. At that point, I thought it would obviously be great to act.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask you've asked like an accountant in Pasadena, they'd be like, yeah, it'd be great to act. Like, everybody wants to act. But at that point, I thought, it's not going to happen. I've been like beaten down by so many years of people not doing it that even though I did Matt and Ben, I wanted to do it to become a writer. And I had largely like let the acting side of my life be like, okay, that'll just be something I don't pursue anymore. And then Greg, after he saw the play, put a clause in my contract that he could use me to act, and then took me and Paul Lieberstein up on that clause in the second episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you were you actively, based on what you just said, like pitching ideas for Kelly based on things you wanted to do?
I was not. It wasn't until probably like end of season 2 when I became confident enough in my job as a writer, because I was just scared I was going to get fired as a writer on the show. So for me I had the kind of good Asian sense to be like, this is pretty good. Let's not try to push it too much here. On a show which, by the way, was critically panned after its first episode and nobody watched it. So I wasn't even sure there was going to be more than that first season. So I was at that point thinking like, if slapping Steve Carell in the second episode of The Office is all that I do, that would be fine. But was also lucky because the show was not a show where Greg did not care about people being cute or fit or particularly. Like, he wanted people who looked regular. So that was, I really was lucky to like work with him in that. That's how Paul and I got on the show, but that's what that show is about. So.
What do you think was sort of the best thing that show trained you to do as an actor?
Well, I think that because I didn't have a big part on The Office, I sat for hours watching Steve Carell, like every day. And many episodes, if you watch it, I don't have any lines, but I'm in these conference room scenes where he has pages and pages of, I believe, like some of the best written stuff, and he would take it to, he'd take stuff that was already very good, because I think we had a good writing staff there, and then he'd just like blow the lid off of it. And so to watch that, I think that is the gift that The Office gave me. Is I met Michael Schur, I met Gene Stupnitsky, Lee Eisenberg, BJ Novak, I met all these writers that were amazing, great downs, but really that I had to sit there in the background and just watch him, that process over and over again up close. I think it made me better. Because you see, like, oh, he's not making that obvious choice there. When he plays, like, Prison Mike, for instance, was an episode, right? Where, like, all the, like, weird choices, the accent he used, like, we didn't tell him to talk like that. And he got a handkerchief and word around his head like a do-rag. Like, he made all these choices. And after, watching him do that for 7 years, I think that was the single most valuable thing. And I just stole. And people don't notice it because I'm an Indian woman, and you don't... Steve Carell cried every single episode of The Office. I mean, or something like that. You were like, he was so emotional, and yet things rolled off of him like that, which I think is such a funny thing as an actor, to let him be like, someone told him he was a lame loser, and then the next moment he's like, but I do think I could marry Terry Hatcher. And that is something that I was like, I've really taken for my character, is like, they're like, you're an overweight loser and you have no status. And I'm like, all of that is true. I still think I can make Anderson Cooper straight and fall in love with me. And it's just such a great, that buoyancy. It's like something I just like completely stole from Steve. Sorry.
At what point did you feel like you wanted to leave The Office, and at what point did you have the idea for the Mindy Project?
Well, it's, I, even in season 7 and season 8, it was still an incredibly fun place to work, even though, at that point it was like going to college twice. I left at the end of season 8, and I was there so many hours. I saw, BJ and Greg and Ed Helms more than I saw any person, and than any person saw their wives or girlfriends or children. We saw each other, but they're an incredibly fun group of people. But at the same time, too, it was like, now that you've seen my show, and you could see, kind of what I wanted to do, and to know that I wanted to do that for like the last 3 years, it became harder because I didn't want to do it as Kelly. Like, I don't think there was that many other stories. I think they serviced the character pretty well, actually. But it's also a lot of money. Like, it was like, and you hear about these shows that star huge people in the last 6 episodes and it gets canceled. I mean, just look at like Justin Kirk, right? He's an amazing actor, so funny and so great. He's on Animal Practice, and it didn't last for very long. And I'm much less good and less funny than him, or in my mind. And so it was risky, the whole process. And there's also this thing of like, at least I feel, where when you leave a show, you kind of can't go back. Even if you're Adriana on The Sopranos, like you cannot go back. Like, I think they killed her off, so it'd be pretty peculiar if she went back. But like you can't go back. And so it was hard, but I thought, if the show goes on, I'd rather leave early than leave when everyone else left, So.
At what point had you already formed the idea for what the Mindy Project would be? What kind of character you wanted to play?
Well, I think that kind of character, like both very savvy and smart and judgmental in one way, but a little bit delusional in another way, was something that, again, it's like the character's so different than Michael Scott. I don't think a single person has ever drawn the comparison, but I've been wanting to play that kind of part for such a long time. It was actually very close to, I did this play called Matt and Ben back in, thank you. The one person is sort of in, he thinks he's applauding for actual Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, but in like 2002, and the character actually is very similar to the way that I played the Ben Affleck character, which is like huge blind spots about their life and stuff, but then also just fun, like wants to have fun. So it had been a character that I'd been like kicking around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the Mindy Project, you're executive producer, you're writing, you're starring. How are you juggling all of that now that you do have sort of everything you wanted?
Well, I don't sleep very much, but I would say, and I've said this before, and this you guys will all, like when you go off and do this and go write your own show, I hate the weekends because this is my dream job. I have to tell myself, BJ Novak, my friend, was telling me last week, he's like, I hope every week you have one moment where you walk around your offices or your set and you say, oh my God, I fucking did it. Like, I did it. Because your personality is not to enjoy it because it could be ripped away from you at any time. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to, like, God to see you enjoying anything so that he thinks that you were, like, not supplicant enough or something. I don't know. But so he's like, I hope you do that. And I was thinking, I should do that. I should enjoy it. But how do I say this? This is what I was going to say. So it's a lot of work, but I hate sleeping because I'm living my dream. So why would you, when I'm at home, I'm like, get me back to work. I want to come up with another fun story. So.
Were there any big surprises, anything that was either harder than you expected or challenging in a way you didn't like?
Yes, what's hard is that when you're in a writer's room, you feel part of a gang and you complain about the same things together, and that's how you ultimately like write good scripts, is become friends with each other. And I loved doing that. I loved like gossiping with Mike Schur about, all the different gripes we had or whatever. And then when you're the boss, you can't be part of the gang. And that sucks because like sometimes I want to like shoot my machine gun in the air and complain, but you can't do that because you're the problem. Like, and then you leave and everyone's like, it's part of how they bond. And to allow that to happen, like Michael Scott faced this problem every day. He like wanted to be part of the group, but you can't be. So I'm the Michael Scott of my office, basically.
You seem to enjoy working with other writer-performers. You have Ike Barinholtz and the Duplass brothers. What do they bring? What's that something extra they bring? What makes them unique?
Well, the first and foremost answer is that they're usually pretty good at improvising, which I find very useful and fun. And even if we don't end up using the improvisation in the final cut, it usually helps people just get into character. And I'm sure you guys do this too, is like one of the tricks I learned from my like minimal experience with acting is that sometimes if you throw down the script because you haven't memorized it and you are improvising in the character, it helps you actually go back to the lines. You have a better understanding of the part. And we do that a lot on the set. So I like the writerly guys. And in fact, working with staff members is good because they largely know where the show is headed because they've been privy to that conversation. So Ike knows when we do scenes together that the improvisation thing, they shouldn't take like a romantic turn because Morgan and Mindy aren't going there, you know? So that's very useful.
Do you, now that you've had a full season of writing so much material for yourself, is that something you enjoy, or do you also enjoy when the other writers are coming up with stuff for your character to say and do?
Right now, I'm really enjoying coming up with like bigger arc ideas. You know, we haven't started shooting yet. We're just breaking stories for next year. So for me, it's like thinking of like which actors would be fun and how could we use like Danny McBride in a way that would be fun for him and fun for us, you know, like, and I'm thinking in big terms, and I go to the room and the staff has come up with specific story ideas, which if I can say and tease this, like the first 8 out of the gate are so funny and good. And it's a lot like what you just saw, and the guest stars we have, I wish I could tell you guys, they're just awesome.
Well, is Danny McBride one of them, since you mentioned him?
I don't know.
Maybe.
That would be amazing. I don't know. But Chloe and Mark are coming back for the premiere, which is, they're so fantastic. And we have such great, funny stuff for Chloe, who we just kind of like touched on in the spring. The problem is that all those guys have their own shows. I think Mark has like 2 shows. He's on The League. He has a new show for HBO. I think he's playing Jennifer Aniston's brother in something, Melissa McCarthy's lover in something. Like, I don't know how he's doing all of that, but he's fitting in the show, which is nice. And Chloe has her own show too, so.
Is it ever weird when you're writing stuff for yourself? I mean, Mindy shares your name, but you're obviously not the same person. Are there a lot of like misconceptions about you as a result of playing someone who also is a Mindy?
I was very worried about that, actually. And actually, when I wrote the show, the character's name was Mira. And Kevin Riley said, he was like, I don't know, I think it should just be Mindy. And I think that it was a comfort thing with him. And I was nervous about it. But ultimately, if I was the lead actress and I was not the creator, I'd be more nervous. Because I wouldn't be able to, people wouldn't know that, okay, well, if she's orchestrating it, then she's got to be more than the character. Because the character can do some pretty shitty things sometimes. But I was nervous about it. The biggest misconception probably is that I'm like my character, when so much of the time, especially this coming season, I'm like, God, I feel so much like Danny. I feel very like a lot of his impatience and his opinions about stuff. I'm like, more and more, I'm like, that is where I'm headed, my personality.
And I mean, aside from the rom-coms, is there anything that, on the other hand, that you guys agree on, that you and Mindy Lahiri agree on, ways that you're super alike?
I think we both have a impatient streak. Actually, that's one thing that I think Danny and Mindy have in common is like, at a certain point, like, you know, the character, I think for the Mindy character is like, this is what we have in common. It's just like, I, like every human, want to be open-minded about taking yoga and going to therapy and dieting and reading books, you know, like I want to do that. But at a certain point, like, you know, when I'm reading whatever, some book, I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Or yoga, I'm like, this is a bit much, the praying at the end of class. Like, I don't need to salute, you know, this God. I just came here to get in shape, ma'am. You know, like I have that side of me
this is very Danny right now.
Yes, that's when I'm Danny. And I have these rants. And this year, one of the things Kevin said, which I really liked, was there's so much stuff about, you know, no, like Mindy's very much like, you have to fall in love with the Empire State Building, you have to do this. But the other side of her is they're like, we want to see where you are like, when Mindy takes on just like, you know, regular life things, which is something we've been exploring this year and has been really fun.
Well, I am still excited about the dating stuff, and one of the things I think the show does really well is that you seem to have chemistry with every single guy the character has dated.
Thank you.
I mean, every single one, and I love Tommy, and I hope you all love Tommy too, as Josh. But are there like secrets to having good chemistry or rules that, how do you make it work every time?
Man, thank you for saying that. That's such a nice compliment. I have to say, and I don't know how to. I think like when you see movies and people don't have, well, we'll say one compliment. Most of the actors that we use would have chemistry with a lot of people. Like Chris Messina, a lot of people talk about Danny and Mindy's chemistry, and I was like, he had a lot of chemistry with almost every person in any movie he's been in. Then 6 Feet Under, him and Lauren Ambrose has amazing chemistry because he just has that vibe around him. Like The Grip is like, do I want to fuck Chris Messina? Like, what's happening? Like, he has those eyes and like he's like, when you're around him, it's almost like he has like little heat waves coming off of him. And, so he's very good. I think that I don't know, I think I pick people who I like and admire, and that kind of comes through. And I don't know, I didn't know Anders before that happened, but a lot of times they're writerly, so we have a respect for each other and we can talk about like the script and things like that, or movies we loved in a way that we can connect to because we're writers. For instance, Seth, Mark Duplass, BJ, and Anders, and even Bill, like we're all people. I think Bill like won an Emmy for writing for South Park. So like they're all writers, and so when we talk about stuff, it's like we can connect mentally, and I think that just carries over into the screen.
How about someone like Tommy, though? I mean, do you do chemistry reads when you're casting these people? Like, what's a deal breaker?
Yeah, I was terrified with Tommy because like I've never encountered a man that looks like him. I mean, he was like 6'2", first of all, an adult blonde man is very difficult to find. Like outside of Los Angeles, they're very rare. In fact, like I don't think I ever met one growing up in Boston. And so he looked. The thing about Tommy is, if you look at him, he's the kind of guy that like guys kind of want to hate because he's just so sort of like pristine. But he was so funny and weird as a character, and I don't know. Like once he showed that, like he had that kind of like weirdness about him. People started liking him, like, and he's very rude to Mindy. His first line to my character is, "I'm trying to guess your job based on your appearance. Are you the mistress of a black congressman?" It's like presumptuous and rude and racial and sexual and sexist and like, and he just became like this. But he was such a fool, I think, but he'd only been cast as like frat dudes before that, But he was unexpected. I'm so glad you like him. We're trying to, have him come back on the show. Yeah.
I know he was a jerk, but get him back. We can make him unjerky.
He was in that last episode when he was in drug rehab. Like I felt like there was like a vulnerability about him that was that I liked. So if we can, maybe he'll get engaged to somebody and I'll go to the wedding or something. I don't know. It could be fun.
Speaking of all the guys, I feel like, all of them have at least had potential, whether they work out or not. And all of them seem to be very un-Jim Halpert-like in that they're all very flawed people. Was that very deliberate on your part, having written for Jim for so long?
Well, Jim Halpert was, from the moment he was on The Office, I mean, it's also John Krasinski, he's so perfect. And Pam is so perfect. And their love story was amazing and wonderful. And then after a while, it's like when they're together, we tried very hard. We didn't want to manufacture problems for them. But it became hard. Like, it's more fun when people are sparring. Also, Jenna, if I can say, is when she played Pam, is very demure. And that character was a fantasy for a lot of guys. It was like, oh, like a pretty demure girl who like doesn't know her worth. And I could never play that part. Like that was what was appealing about her to a lot of guys. It was like, oh, I'll rescue her, And because that's so far out of the realm of anything I could play, like I'm so like decisive and masculine and competent. Like I just feel like I'm not gonna like be like the shrinking tulip that you're like, I just want to save her. That little cartoon character. Like no one's gonna lift me and carry over like me over a threshold. Like so I was like, well, Jim should be different too,
One of the other episodes I really liked was the one that got away, which had Seth Rogen in it.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites.
It totally made me cry at the end. But tell me why you thought of Seth, because he's sort of gentler in this than we've ever really seen him in anything else.
Well, I had worked with Seth on, I have a very small part in This Is the End, and then I just known him socially from a while back. And what I love about Seth is that he's so natural, always. And he's so comfortable in his own skin. And he would probably even say, like, you know, he's not the most versatile person, like he doesn't like disappear into roles or whatever, but of all the actors I've ever worked with, he is the most natural. And I was dying to work with him. And part of getting, you know, movie stars to come to a TV show is you're like, I'd like to write for you in a way that's different than what you've usually played. And for him to come aboard and be a soldier who was like a regular guy also, and someone who I pined for, like, I think he was just kind of attracted to that. But there's a scene that I'm so proud of in that where it's like, we're just laying in bed talking about how the sex was, and he was like, it was good, and it's like, you don't get to see a lot of that kind of thing, like a scene play out for 3 minutes uninterrupted between two actors on a network sitcom. And that was great about him, is that we could improvise, and it was worth watching, so.
I'm sure everyone's also waiting for me to ask about Chris Messina, Mindy, and Danny. What made you think of Chris?
Well, I had seen Chris, obviously, in 6 Feet Under and loved him in that. And then, but what really kind of opened my eyes was Away We Go, which is a movie I saw because John was in it. And it was the Sam Mendes movie and everything. But he kind of, in my mind, stole that movie. And he was just so amazing. And by the way, not my kind of like person at all. Like, I don't know anybody like Chris. He hangs out with all these like brooding New York actors like Michael Shannon and Sam Rockwell and all these like weirdos like who are deeply talented and wear black leather jackets and hang out at like the Bowery. And I don't know, and they take their craft really seriously, and like when they were younger, like annihilated women, and they just like destroyed all of women. Women love them, and just he's like a dude, right? And he like can talk seriously about acting classes to me, and I have trouble with, you know, and this is one of the hardest things with being an actor, is you have to be very vulnerable and you have to be very earnest. And you can't laugh if you're uncomfortable. You have to be like, okay, I have to be open to this. And that was the great thing about Chris, is like we had obviously so many of the same comedy actors that, you know, come through the UCB routes, and they're all very funny. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a better actor with Chris. So it was kind of a selfish choice. And he would say this too. Like, I think he learned a lot about comedy from like me and Ike and stuff. You know, his transformation from the beginning, you know, to the end of the season, like he's done some incredibly funny stuff. But I thought, like, besides the camera loving him, which I think it does, there's certain people that the camera just wants to stay on them. I think he's like that. I think Anders is like that too. But not everyone is like that. And he was just gonna make me really much better.
Did he need convincing at all? Did you have to reach out to him, or?
He wanted to do something. He wanted like a regular gig. He wanted to live in LA. His wife, Jen Todd, is actually like an incredibly talented producer who runs Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's company. So she's based here. And he had never done comedy. I think the last thing he'd done was Damages, where he'd been like as like far across the spectrum as you possibly. I mean, he was getting tortured in Iraq by John Goodman.
You're right.
I think that was his last thing.
Yes, it's very devastating.
I think it was but he also was like, and this is what I like about him, Chris is very ambitious and entrepreneurial, and he was like, I want to be part of that. Like, he wanted to be in that world of, you know, of like my group of actors and writers and comedy taste. And so we created a character for him where he could, you know, Danny's a serious guy, but it's such a funny character, and that was kind of how we got him to be comfortable doing it.
I remember you told me once that Aaron Sorkin was at your initial table read, and he had worked with Chris on The Newsroom, and he had some suggestions for the character. What were those suggestions?
I remember, okay, I'm trying to think of, largely Aaron came because when Aaron Sorkin comes to your table read, people are like, okay, this girl has her shit together. Like, he was like, it was one of those things, and I think for Chris, he had written the character and the show, Reese, as, I think he just gave the note where it's just like, Chris is very good at memorization. This is not but he has these long Sorkin monologues where he's talking about like why Fox News is important or whatever his character talks about on that show. And I think he told me, he's like, you can give him that stuff. And largely in comedies, people don't have these types of monologues. But it helped. I mean, we give him long rants, but we can give Chris, because he prepares, which is so rare in a sitcom. He really goes home and prepares, which is amazing. Like, you can give him these long rants. Or like, okay, you're going to talk about, you know, why people, like, about when you get angry at people for not accepting pennies. You know, it's not exactly Sorkin, but, and he does it, which is nice.
And at what point did you all become really comfortable doing your impressions of Chris in front of Chris?
You know, Ike Barinholtz, the genius of Ike Barinholtz is, besides being, because I'm a hothead, and so is Chris. So we fight, and that, I think, occasionally, and that becomes very, that it can be a little tense. We love each other underneath it, but we're both very headstrong. The great thing about Ike Barinholtz is that because he's a writer and he's an actor, he's like Chris's bro, but he gets what we're trying to do, and he diffuses everything. So we couldn't do Chris Messina impressions unless Ike started doing them, because Chris knows that Ike loves him. Like, if I had started it, the show would have been canceled. Like, I think. But you know that saying where, like, you have to let them sniff your hand. You know that saying about, like, with dogs, you have to, like, you just can't start petting them, let them sniff your hand or whatever. But with Chris, like, Ike serves as, like, not just with Chris, but with so many people, Ike is so fun and lovable that he is often the person that they sniff his hand and then they realize we're, like, an okay place to be. So.
Do you feel any pressure at all to put Mindy and Danny together? We had a little bit of a maybe at the end of the season, but how do you think about them? Have they always been sort of like your Sam and Diane, or?
Sam and Diane, obviously, Cheers is one of my favorite shows, and they're, you know, what we achieved too. We put them on such a pedestal, but the human mind, like when you watch TV, like you want things to be romantic. Like you watch a show, and if you think you see two people who are near each other, you want to pair them up. That's like how my mind works. On The Office, the one thing I learned, and this is the only way that the two are similar to Jim and Pam, is entire episode can go by and Pam can put her head on Jim's shoulder, and then all you remember from the episode is like, that's the one where Pam put her head on Jim's shoulder. It becomes the Pam Jim head shoulder episode instead of whatever else it was. And so knowing that, we know that like a little goes a long way. And I also, to be honest, like I don't know, many people have told me that they don't think the two of those characters should be together romantically, that they prefer a relationship that's more avuncular, or like, you know, Jack Donaghy and Liz Lemon, where it's more adversarial. And I think it'd be a pity to go through the show without doing like a hardcore makeout scene with Chris Messina, just because like he's down for it. But I also know that like that's not, we're so early in the series. Like if we get somebody who is his, you know, his one true love, you know, a Chloe type actress who actually, you know, who isn't on her own TV show or something, it's like, that would be great. So I'm open to everything.
So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and look at Anders, right? No one even knew who he was on the show anyway until the middle of April. And then now people are like, we don't want him to leave. So people.
That's a problem. All of Mindy's guys are people I'm like, oh yes, no, I want them to be together. And the next one comes along.
That is such a nice compliment, by the way, because there are shows, and I obviously won't name them, where it's so obvious that the guy that they bring in to be the obstacle is like just some
loser,
dopey moron, and like they don't write for them in a way that like, you know, gives them where you want them to be together at all. So I take that as a great compliment. So thank you.
Is there any of Mindy's sort of romantic foibles that have been taken from your own life?
Well, I've said this before. Like, I have not even met as many men as Mindy dated this past year. Like, it's amazing how many guys that she's dated. So I mean, I've had like 4 boyfriends in my life, and maybe like 2 dates preceding being in relationships with them. So I have very little experience with dating, but I'm obsessed with reading about dating, and I love watching it on TV, and it's really fun as someone who has social anxiety, as I do, to go on pretend dates. Because it's like you get to test out all the things you'd want to say, and so that's been fun. But I really don't have a ton of dating experience. I'm trying to think. You know, I have a lot of experience with heartbreak, but you know, largely on a comedy show, people don't really want to see that much. But yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm fine. Like, this suddenly becomes like a Barbara Walters interview. I'm weeping.
That could never happen. You've talked a lot about You've Got Mail, and you know, you kind of riffed on When Harry Met Sally on the show. Are there any other romantic comedies that you kind of want to play with next season? Like, is there a...
Yeah, it's been really fun finding our inspiration for it, but we were thinking about today Sleepless in Seattle and The Parent Trap, because those are both Parent Trap. The original Parent Trap is, hell, the new one's even pretty good. I've seen them both. But the first one's like a great movie. And I really think there was some stuff to play, because I'm 33, and you know, when people try to set me up, all the time I'm getting set up with guys who have kids, and because I love acting with kids, like the Teen Patient episode was fun, and it was really fun for me to go to the college and playing with my goddaughter, the little girl. It was like, that seems like a really fun area. So both Sleepless in Seattle and Parent Trap have that element in them. So.
Well, speaking of Teen Patient, I really enjoyed watching your struggles with the beanbag chair.
Thank you.
As you know. Can you talk a little bit about pratfalls and your willingness to look silly and why it's sort of important to the show?
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I think is great, and which is why I love physical comedy, is I think there's a tendency to think, and I think I've even fallen into this trap in the past too, where it's like when a man is very good at physical comedy, you're like, what an amazing physical comedian. But a woman is, you almost feel like the tacit thing is like, well, she was probably kind of klutzy anyway. Like, and that it's kind of like not as much of like, okay, I gotta like practice this and do this. And I love doing it. It's so much fun. And it's also like, and you guys are all actors, like, it's the greatest gift to be like, okay, try to climb that beanbag chair. And you cannot, make it take you 15 tries to get on top of it. And if you guys just had to go home and do this right now, it would be the most fun, like 20 minutes of your life to try to do that. And I just got to do it. And then once I realized, you know, 12 episodes in, that because it was, or whatever, 8 episodes in that happened, and you know, the network saw it, we had just always thought so much of it was so heady, and the show was so much about talking and banter and romance. And I was like, I love this other stuff. And it really opened the floodgates, not only for me, but like, you know, Chris saw it, and then he started, like, he was like, I really want you to give me that stuff. So we're like, okay, you're gonna fall in a manhole, you're going to triathlon, where, you know, and then once Chris was into it, it's like Duplass was like, let me do it. And Hader was like, I want to do that. So it became a show where we would scope out a set, think of an idea, and then be like, I think in Frat Party, this episode actually probably has more physical comedy than any of our episodes. So that's really fun. And visual stuff is fun too, like the wind chimes and the dog, and like the visual joke of Ike Barinholtz, who's like 240 pounds holding a tiny puppy. Like sometimes it's so rewarding as an image. You know, you just keep cutting back to him holding this tiny asleep puppy, and it was like, this is fun.
I'm going to start reading some of your questions, but I have one more question to ask, and it's about, you had 2 shower scenes on the show. You were trapped in a fancy shower, and you tried to make out with Pastor Casey in the shower. Tell me about the second one, which I thought was hilarious and very intricate. It seemed very choreographed.
So at that point, the thing about Anders was that I didn't know him at all before he did the show. I'd met him socially once or twice, but he was always like a popular athlete. Like we went to college on like a swimmer scholarship, and he has like a perfect body, and he's 6'3", right? So I was largely like terrified of him. Also, he's cool. He like raps. So he's like a cool, intimidating, not, by the way, overtly friendly person when I met him. And so, but the good news was in the show, like the first scene we did together was like a scene in bed for this episode, Santa Fe, from like, because of our shooting order. And luckily before that shower scene, we had a lot of time, and you guys probably know this on set, between takes to find out about each other and stuff. So I was lucky because I couldn't have done that early on. But it was incredibly fun. It was incredibly fun. You know, it should have been awful, but it was like 3 hours of, you know, just improvising with him, and it was just really super fun. I wish I had like
Not awkward at all.
no awkward because I'm wearing a brown like strapless bathing suit, which even you know when soaking wet you can see everything. It's not I don't know why you know I had to wear something, and he was wearing tiny flesh colored briefs, but like that's the you know I've seen every inch of his body. I mean, like in the finale, his penis was supposed to have knocked off my glasses. Like, so I think there was just a tacit understanding early on in the show. It was like, okay, we're just gonna be like cool about this and not be like dickheads, right? Like we're gonna be fine. And he's married and he's a sweetheart, and so it ended up being he kind of like led the way a little bit. So
Good. Well, it worked out.
yeah.
All right, I'm going to take some of your questions. Nicole wants to know, was it fun, weird, or difficult being the only female writer on The Office?
It was very, very fun. And I will say that it was only fun because, you know, I think there's a lot of writers' rooms in Hollywood that have all guys or mostly guys, and the atmosphere is charged in a either subtly or not subtly, like anti-woman way. Because of how the writers were, you know, raised or whatever else. This writer's room at the beginning was all a bunch of feminist dudes who were like, you know, Mike Schur, Greg Daniels, like these are super hardcore feminists who went to Harvard. And to be in that room with Paul Lieberstein and all these guys, it's like they were technically all dudes, yes. However, they were very much like, are you feeling safe now? Do you feel... So for me, I mean, I was like... I was a woman and a minority and the youngest person, so they were really like, are you they were on, you know, they treated me with tenterhooks, or like they were, you know, they were very gentle with me in a way that I of course was like, I must be pretty great, like, and made me have like a confidence that was unearned. But I know that is very rare, and I know that that's not the experience for women largely in comedy writers' rooms.
Michelle wants to know if you have any advice for actors/writers who are pitching their scripts.
I guess, Michelle, you're here, I'm assuming.
Yes,
but like
all these people
pitching to like networks and studios, that's what I'm assuming? Yeah. Okay, I think one of the things, at least when I am hearing people, like, I think there's a tendency in my own writing too, because I still pitch all the time. I pitched episodes today to the network, is you tend to get, you know, a story so well. So you get caught up in like, and then this happens, like the plot of something. And largely what anybody wants to hear is just someone with like a fresh take and is like, you know, and so I think that is like, what is it trying to say? Like, I think that people are less interested in like, you know, the tiny plot things and more about like, okay, well, how is this person a different person than every person that's walked through the door? And so that's one thing. The other thing I have to say is just if you love your idea, and especially if it's a comedy idea, that when you tell it with such love that you almost can't help but laugh when you tell it, because that is so infectious. One of the best things about BJ Novak, and the reason why so much of his stuff got in the script, is that when he tells or pitched jokes, he was always about to make himself laugh. And you were like, this is gonna be pretty fucking good if this BJ's like cracking up. And even like, and it would always like, because that's just a nice quality in someone when they're telling something. And I think those are two things that I love seeing when people pitch ideas to me.
Catherine wants to know what you consider the most valuable training you've had over your entire experience.
Most valuable training. I think, like I said before, it was just having that seat and watching Steve for that many years.
Allison wants to let you know that this question's from her mom, who's a huge fan in Colorado.
Oh.
When you're working in a writer's room for comedy, is it very fun and jovial, or is there a lot of pressure to be funny so then it becomes really stressful?
It is, first of all, I'm sorry about the Colorado fires. That's not a joke. I'm sorry that that's happening. And I would say that it is fun and jovial, and that there is pressure when you're a staff writer at the beginning because you feel you're supposed to talk a lot, but that's a thing that people think, and largely you're supposed to be quiet. So it's good. You're just supposed to be like taking things in and not really saying that much.
Chris wants to know who the funniest person you have ever met is.
The funniest person I've ever met. I'm lucky to know a lot of funny people. Well, okay. I think that, we mentioned Danny McBride. There's something about Danny McBride right now where he can say anything and it is funny. And I think Jonah has that quality too, a little bit. And I think those two, and then just in terms of, I don't get to hang out with those guys that much because they're so busy, but I think just day to day, I think BJ Novak is really funny. I don't know. David Stassen is here. He's one of the writers on the show. I think he's here. Would you agree that, oh, there you are. Would you agree that about BJ? He does that. Has everything I've been saying, has it been accurate, would you say, this evening? David is one of the talented writers. He's also Ike's writing partner. Accurate? Okay. Cool. I guess that's true. You're right. He can't say anything under pain of death. We'll talk later. Okay.
Paige wants to know which female comedian inspires you the most.
These days I'm inspired a lot by Lena Dunham. I think that she is scrutinized almost more than any comedian that I've ever seen, for doing what is the hardest thing, which is she has virtually no peers as a woman trying to do her own show that's different than other people's, and I'm kind of disgusted by how much she's scrutinized and pounded on for not giving roles to women or not doing for whatever. When you look at the staffs of so many shows on TV, and the same people who criticize her don't even care about other popular shows, and what she's doing is so new and different and fresh. And so for that, I get actually kind of angry because I think it's really unfair. And you don't have to like girls, but the way that she is scrutinized is terrible. And also she's just so funny and so fresh. And talking about pitching, I mean you either like that show or you don't, but she is so herself. She's not trying to be something else. And I happen to love it. So for me, it's, yeah. So, and I know it's not, if I watched half an episode with my dad, he would probably move back to India. But I know that it's but I know that about it. And so I get it. So, I think I find Lena amazing. Because Tina Fey had to do 24 episodes of a TV show, which is more what I do now, I think that the quality of that show, the consistent quality for 6 years, 7 years, whatever was on, I find that amazing that she was able to do this because it's really a hard job. So those two, I think.
The final question is from Leander, and the question is, what classes or books or schools do you recommend for an actor who wants to learn how to write?
For an actor who wants to learn how to write. For books, I have always found it really enjoyable and to read scripts from my favorite TV shows. For instance, if it's comedy anyway, and I can't speak to dramatic writing, but Freaks and Geeks, the compilations, a while ago, when Virgin Megastore was still here, they had a section with that. I think it's you can get that at Barnes and Noble too, but I would just buy all of my favorite shows or sketch comedy shows where they have the scripts and just read. And to me, reading them and nerdily going through with a pencil and being okay, there was the joke and that was it, is how I sort of learned how to do it. And I'd recommend that. Or, I don't know, in terms of a book, I don't know. I watch everything. And so I think that if you're trying to learn how to do it, watch all this, like every sketch show, and I watch Saturday Night Live. But I used to watch things and watch them like 3 or 4 times to understand the rhythms of stuff. Because where I was growing up, we didn't have like, you didn't have like, couldn't go to like improv class or whatever. So I just learned by studying stuff like that. That's what I would recommend.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Yeah,
I hope that was
thank you.
helpful.
Thanks for coming
Thanks
out,
for
guys.
coming.